Hello and welcome to Female Futures, Future Females. My name's Laura-Jane Devanny and I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Northampton with a research specialism in contemporary women's writing and speculative fiction. Today I'm going to do a book talk on the novel More Perfect by Temi Oh, which came out in 2023. Some of the key issues in this book that made me super excited to get my hands on a copy and have made me include it in the research that I'm currently focusing on is that it deals with the impact of, the ever-growing world of AI and the impact of that on future society. It also looks at the impact of cyborgian technologies and these human-machine interfaces and how that blurs the boundaries between machine and human. So tons in here to unpick, and I'll get started initially with an overview of the synopsis. The novel takes place in a near future London where it has become possible to receive a neural implant called a pulse. And this pulse enables you to become permanently connected with this online network called the Panopticon. The Panopticon it's a bit like, I suppose, being permanently connected to the internet in that you have access to all of the information that's out there all of the time. Now, not only does the pulse enable you to be permanently connected with this online network, it also enables connection with anybody else who has a pulse, which in this futuristic society is the majority of all of its citizens. So you're permanently connected to everyone and everything all of the time. And the Panopticon is working towards creating this more perfect world. So that's where the title of the novel comes in that because there is a heightened state of surveillance and monitoring of all of the citizens who have a pulse, there are lower crime rates. It's far more convenient for the citizens because you just have all this information at your fingertips, or not at your fingertips, actually embedded within your brain. And it also combats loneliness because you have this permanent connection to everybody else around you in society. So the Panopticon is supposed to facilitate this more perfect world. The storyline is told through the eyes of two protagonists. Moremi is a young woman who has been brought up within this society, so she's part of the mainstream. And then Orpheus is a character who has been brought up initially by his father outside of mainstream society. So his father being this kind of neo-Luddite character who didn't want his boy being brought up in the system. And these two eventually end up meeting over the course of the novel and develop a love interest. So the love interest forms the basis of the storyline, along with the increasingly dystopian turn that the story takes through the British government taking increasing control over the Panopticon and its virtual and physical inhabitants. So I won't give any spoilers in this book talk because one thing that I really enjoyed during my first read of this novel was the number of twists and turns and the kind of surprises that take place over the development of the plot, and I wouldn't want to spoil that for anybody else. So with that in mind, the novel is told in 3 parts, and I'll mainly focus on part 1 so that I don't give any spoilers away. However, there is lots in part 1 to provide a real insight into some of the key themes and some of the key issues that this novel deals with. One thing that I suppose I can say at this point, which potentially gestures towards the direction in which the plotline will go, is the choice of names for the 2 protagonists. So Moremi is a legendary Yoruba queen who helped to liberate her people, and Orpheus is taken from Greek mythology, and he visited the underworld in an attempt to bring back his dead wife. And the significance of the names of these characters does become apparent as the novel progresses. So with that in mind, I think we will start looking into some of the key themes and issues that I think this novel deals with particularly well. The first aspect that I'd like to focus on is the way in which the novel portrays the ever-evolving relationship between humans and technology. And the novel does this through the trope of the pulse and the online network, the panopticon. So it is readily recognisable to us because technology is becoming ever more pervasive within modern society. But within the novel, you're permanently connected to this online world of information and everyone that partakes in it. And it's now a bodily experience rather than one to be had through a handheld device. So in the novel, Moremi details what it was like waking up in the panopticon for the first time just after having her pulse fitted. So I'll read a short extract from that section so that you get the picture of what this connection manifests as within the novel. What does it feel like to wake up in the panopticon? It's like waking up for the first time ever. It's like waking up with a third eye. The nurse is beaming at her. What can you see? She asks. It looks as if Moremi is staring at her from behind the lens of a digital camera. Her vision is dotted with points of light that resolve into letters, numbers. Crosshairs appear around the nurse's doughy features as the retinal interface searches the panopticon for a match. The nurse's profile appears in a nimbus of translucent light floating around her. Moremi learns that her name is Juliana Sanchez, DOB 3rd of the 4th, 2001, occupation, paediatric nurse, Pimlico School, children 6. So she has this visual overload sensation initially and realises that whoever she looks at, she can find out all of this quite personal information about them. So, as I mentioned, this is something that is readily recognisable because we also have access to information at our fingertips nowadays, but this is through currently the use of a device rather than something that's implanted within our own neural pathways. So as it continues, Moremi carries on detailing her experiences. When she turns left, a projection on the window pane tells her that there is a 90% chance of drizzle between 4:26 p.m. and 5:40 p.m. Tells her that it's t-shirt weather until then, expertly feeding information about her core body temperature against the weather predictions for that day. An architecture app spies the newly built maths block of the school, and the profile of the architects is summoned up. Moremi waves a hand to dismiss it. After a while, the panopticon will learn her preferences and only feed her information relevant to her profile and interests. It will point out her friends in a cafe. It will tell her if a celebrity she likes frequents the same coffee shop. It will define words she's always wondered about. Answer questions before she's thought to ask them. So I think we do get some glimpse there into the direction this novel takes in exploring quite a balanced argument actually about the positives of this kind of technology in terms of how convenient it is and how all of this information is just there for you to access at any given point in time. But that last bit there, answer questions before she's thought to ask them, it raises some interesting ideas around data sets, algorithms, you know, how to some extent what we see online is actually already predetermined by our previous search histories. Who has control over the information that we have access to? How do we choose what we get to see in terms of the information we have access to? So it is something that is shown to have these potentially quite inhibiting consequences in terms of, you know, in that instance, stifling the human proclivity towards asking questions, for example. And as the novel goes on, this is something that is explored in more depth. The novel does to some extent warn of the potential dangers of an over-reliance on technology. And it shows us how all of what we're experiencing today in terms of technological developments could lead to a future whereby we almost forget how to live without it. So Moremi does remember a time before the neural implant of the pulse where she lost her phone, and she compares it to the loss of a limb. She says, that phantom limb pain familiar from the old days. Once she'd reached into her pocket to discover that her phone had been stolen. With a stab of terror, she'd realised that she'd lost something as integral to her as a sense. And that's something that really, I think, resonates with readers today, in that we've all had that feeling, you know, we've forgotten our phone, left it at home, and you all of a sudden have that panic that, oh no, how am I going to be able to access anything that I need? How am I going to be able to get by through the day? This happens to Moremi at a point in the novel where there's been a cyber attack, and hundreds of people, well, local to her, obviously in the novel it's wider than that, it's the entirety of society, lose access to their pulse, and they all become disconnected. But rather than losing a device, it's the pulse itself that doesn't work, and so she's left with a far more bodily sense of loss. So she says, when she's describing the feeling of being without her pulse, having grown reliant on it, every hour without her pulse made Moremi feel even more disorientated and sick, as if she was trying to navigate life without one of her senses. She could tell the people around her were getting restless as well. It was maddening to know so little about what was going on. As midnight came and went, dread began to creep up her back. So I think it's taken that heightened sense of panic that you might get when losing your phone, but actually made it much more embedded, because now with this cyborgian technology, the information is inside of her, this implant is inside of her, it's felt far more as a sense of bodily loss. So it's much more extreme. And many other members, as I mentioned, of the society lose access to the pulse and therefore lose access to the panopticon. And this particular episode in the novel shows how completely vulnerable we are if we lose access to the kind of technology that we've become reliant on. If we've become reliant on it, we then don't know how to live without it. Another aspect that the novel explores is the potential loss of privacy and actually loss of freedom that can come in a society where we have this oversharing of data sets and oversharing of information, which is actually something that I suppose is the topic of hot debate nowadays. In the novel, this is explored through the character of Orpheus, who as a boy was raised by his anti-establishment father outside of mainstream society. And his father chose to do this because he was this rebellious figure. He didn't want his boy being raised under the remit and control of this authoritarian government who could look into and monitor the lives of everyone else in society. This isn't a spoiler. Orpheus is found and he's taken in by the authorities. And I'll just read you a short extract of when he is found by them. When they had found him, he was a pulseless minor with no parents and no biometric data recorded on any system. A face that no camera recognised. Anonymous, they call it, which, of course, is a crime. Orpheus wakes to discover the nurses, the doctors and social workers have already agreed on their own narrative of his life. They tell him that the way his father brought him up, totally isolated from the outside world, was a form of abuse. They treat him like a survivor, the sole escapee from an extremist religious sect. So I think it's quite interesting here in that this futuristic vision shows how over time a government could eventually take control of technology in this way, and how it can even become legislation. You know, it's criminal now to be anonymous. His father is seen as abusive because he has kept Orpheus away from the pulse and the panopticon. The other interesting element that is part of Orpheus's capture and reintegration into society actually revolves around consent and how far people have the right to opt in or out of such information sharing. So I'll read you the section of where Orpheus wakes up for the first time after having his pulse fitted, which is a very different experience to that of Moremi. Waking up to the panopticon is like waking up in the tempest of a storm. Orpheus is screaming when he opens his eyes, reaching out reflexively to grab the icons, the lights and holograms resolving in his field of vision. A blizzard of data, the roar of voices, people he doesn't know talking about things he's never heard of. How do I make it stop? He asks the doctor, who replies, it never will. So it becomes apparent that Orpheus doesn't actually have a choice about being signed up to the panopticon and about having this neural implant fitted, which is actually quite an invasive medical procedure. He does become reintegrated, though, within this society, and he, after fitted with his pulse, he becomes part of what the authorities are calling the Good People Project. And the tagline for that is Good Dreams for Vulnerable People. So it's this fictional trial scheme whereby within prisons and in children's homes and linking with people who have a troubled past, it's a type of cognitive behavioural therapy that revolves around sculpting and creating people's dreams. So I'll read you an extract to give you an overview of what that project is. According to the Ministry of Sleep and Dreams, the Good People Project is being trialled in a number of prisons, detention centres and children's divisions across the country, and has been judged so far to be an overwhelming success. During the Panopticon's controlled trials, prisoners who had undergone dream therapy for at least 6 months were half as likely to reoffend. Many of them went on to seek gainful employment, apologised to their victims. They become model citizens, compassionate fathers or hard-working women. His form tutor explains to Orpheus that children who have lost their parents and undergo this course of therapy are less likely to be depressed or anxious, have fewer instances of suicidal ideation, form more secure attachments. So there, what this project does through the pulse, it's able to control and amend and change people's behaviour and people's worldviews, and this is shown to be quite positive and have quite productive outcomes, but the idea of power and control is questioned. So Orpheus replies to his form tutor, "But nobody asked me," Orpheus says, clenching his teeth in frustration. "No one even told me. I thought for weeks that these were my dreams." So again, this issue of consent, what choice people have, what freedom people have, really comes under question. Another aspect that the novel portrays is this duality between the material, bodily, felt elements of lived experience and the informational, technological aspects of how we interpret the world around us. So both characters at various stages in the book find that they're beginning to privilege technology and information over real felt bodily experiences. And one particular example that really shows this in action is when the character of Orpheus learns how to control and build dreams, and he starts creating and selling dreams on the black market to other people, but in doing so, he himself becomes addicted to spending time in the dreams and spending time in this dream state. And therefore, his body becomes a secondary aspect of his lived experience. So I'll just read you an extract from the novel that shows this. Orpheus loves dreaming so much that meat space takes on a lacklustre sheen. Sometimes he stays under so long he wakes to find that in the real world days have passed and he can no longer feel his legs. His grades begin to slide and soon he is failing all his classes. But Orpheus doesn't care. He believes that his body is a tool, good for nothing but to take him back. to the island he built on the light side of a moon, a quiet beach with a scale replica of his childhood home. So, he's really developed this disdain for material reality by referring to it as meat space. And it does also provide a slight warning in terms of privileging information and technology over the body, because life is lived through bodies, and it does come back. He has to wake up, he has to come back to his body. The novel also reminds the readers that life is lived through bodies during the episode of the cyber attack, whereby Moremi and lots of other members of society have to learn to live without their pulse and without being connected to that informational entity of the panopticon that they've become used to. So with that, it does outline that if technology fails, it is the material physical body that we live our lives through. The novel provides some really interesting and thought-provoking debate around science, technology, and what it means to be human. It gives these insights through a range of thought-provoking scenarios, which is something that I've mentioned in previous episodes. Speculative fiction does really well. In this novel, for example, towards the beginning, Moremi is shown as being a real advocate for the potential of science and technology for good, and she sees it in an incredibly positive light. She is at a protest, a demonstration against the pulse and the panopticon, and she actually speaks up and advocates for science and technology and the good that it is capable of doing. So I'll just read you some of her arguments that she puts forward during the protest. So she's talking about science, and she says to the crowd, "It's not something outside of us, it's part of us, a great endeavour, as beautiful as painting or music or poetry. You talk about what it means to be human, to invent, to innovate and build what it means to be human. But it also means suffering and dying, children dropping like flies from cholera because there is no clean water, women bleeding to death in childbirth, Alzheimer's, which doctors at that building have cured," she points at the watchtower, "cancer, pandemics, dirty water, those pose an existential threat to our existence. Sickness and suffering and a swift death, those are inherent to our condition. But science, machines, computers have come to our aid, will come." So she has this incredibly altruistic view in terms of the potential of science and technology and these new developments that others can find unsettling or disconcerting. And she really believes in technology and science as being this force for good. And this argument's quite an interesting one, because she actually says that science and technology are part of what it means to be human. So she's questioning that boundary between humans and machines. But then we get a contrasting view through her sister Zeba. They are placed in opposition with one another with some of the aspects that come up in debate, and Zeba's view is that technology can't solve everything, and we actually need to be looking at ourselves and the rest of society if we want to solve problems. So Zeba says, "The questions the future is asking us are not technological. They won't be solved with engineering. They will be solved by good government. Singularity, I just want equality. I just want to feel like my body belongs to me. I just want to stop worrying that I will get raped walking home alone at night. I'd just like to live as long as my white friends, and not worry that death or disease or childbirth or a rogue protection drone is way more likely to kill me." So Zeba raises questions around gender, race, class, those social justice elements, by thinking about people in society who are disenfranchised. And then that raises wider issues about power constructs and how that science and technology is actually controlled and disseminated. You know, who will it be used by in society, and how will that be facilitated? So with the debates, the novel doesn't actually provide any concrete or easy answers, but what it does do is highlight how we need to be cautious when thinking about these things, and we do need to think carefully and critically about how we will move forward with all of these ever-evolving developments in science and technology. So I did say I wouldn't be giving any spoilers for this book, but just for a brief overview, part 2 details the aftermath of the cyber attack that infiltrates the panopticon and the virus that is spread to everybody's neural implants, their pulses, and how this affects wider society. Part 3 then traces Moremi and Orpheus and details their various roles within the cyber attack and its eventual resolution. So I mentioned previously, the novel doesn't give any concrete or easy answers, and it doesn't provide a straightforward answer regarding the impact of technology, you know, the technology that's portrayed in the novel and the influence that it has over those in society. And it does this through not giving a happy ending or a sad ending. You know, it's just something in terms of a warning regarding the potential dangers, the power, the reach that this new and developing technology has, which gets us thinking more carefully about who designs these new technologies and how these new technologies are then implemented within wider society. We also are prompted to think about who in society has the power, who has the control, who is disenfranchised, how can we avoid exacerbating inequities that are already existing in society, how can all of this be addressed through technology, and ultimately how can technology be used as a force for good. So if they sound like issues that you're interested in, I would really recommend this novel. I mean, I know you can see it's quite thick, but it was a really great read. And as I say, the twists and turns in the plots will definitely keep your interest up and keep you hooked. I'm also going to, in the near future, be using some extracts from this novel in a series of writing workshops that I'll be delivering with some local sixth form students. So I'm super excited about that. And I hope that they and you will enjoy reading this book as much as I did. So I hope you found the book talk interesting and insightful. If so, it'd be lovely if you could like and maybe subscribe if you want to be kept up to date on my future book talks and research talks. If you have any questions or comments, please do pop them below, and I look forward to seeing you in future episodes.